The stars did not sing to them, they screamed. Long before Earth's colonies burned, before the first fractal horrors peeled open the sky, the Vaelthari found the infants. Not in the wreckage of ships or the ashes of cities, but drifting in cryptpods of human design, their tiny lungs gulping recycled air. The aliens did not understand tears. They dissected the concept, analyzed the salt, the heat, the convulsions of muscle, and deemed it a flaw. Flaws, they reasoned, could be weaponized. They named the children Eidolons, after the ghostly echoes of dead stars. The Vaelthari raised them in bioluminescent nurseries, fed them algorithms instead of lullabies, and carved their bones with symbiont tech that hummed like trapped lightning. "You are the blade we forged to cut the dark," the conclave intoned, their swarm voices buzzing through the Eidolons' dreams. But the children noticed things, how their guardians flinched at certain wavelengths of light, how the Shardspire's living walls sometimes bled black ichor, how the word home was scrubbed from every lesson. The oldest Eidolon, a girl with eyes like fractured glass, once asked about the scars on the Vaelthari's exoskeletons. The conclave answered by flooding her chamber with a memory, a planet unraveling into teeth, a chorus of human screams harmonizing into a language not meant for tongues. She never asked again. By the time the Eidolons learned to split atoms with their minds and taste the lies in starlight, they'd forgotten their birth names. But the Vaelthari could not erase the itch in their marrow, the one that whispered, "You were meant for more than survival." Above the Shardspire, the void yawned hungrily. And something older than the void began to wake. Chapter 1. The Shardspire was alive. Its walls pulsed with veins of bioluminescent moss, exhaling spores that hung in the air like static. Jin pressed a palm to the corridor's shifting surface, feeling the megastructure's heartbeat thrum through their bio-gauntlet, a living weapon fused to their forearm, its cartilage ridges sharp enough to split bone. "The conclave summons us," Rook said, his voice a neural pulse that bypassed sound. His gauntlet flickered, casting jagged shadows as the hallway ahead reconfigured itself, floor tiles spiraling into a staircase. They moved without speaking. Speech was inefficient, a relic of their species' infancy. The Vaelthari had purged such habits decades ago, when the Starforged were still soft-skinned and prone to weeping. Now their communication was a lattice of synaptic bursts, danger, obedience, purpose. Jin paused at a junction where the ceiling yawned open, revealing a kaleidoscope of starless void. The Shardspire's geometry was a living equation, its corridors rewriting themselves to outmaneuver entropy, or so the conclave claimed. Rook's gauntlet flared crimson, a rare emotional leak, impatience. "They're waiting," Jin pulsed back. A tendril of moss brushed Jin's cheek, and for a moment the walls breathed. The conclave's chamber was a hive of chitin and shadow. The Vaelthari scholars hovered in a swarm, their insectoid bodies clicking like abacus beads. Jin knelt, gauntlet pressed to the floor. Cold seeped into their knees. "Begin," the conclave intoned, their telepathy a sawblade hum. A hologram flickered, a Möbius strip devouring its own tail. Rook stiffened. Last week's lesson had left him catatonic for hours, his mind unraveling the paradox of a Klein bottle. "Solve it," the conclave demanded. Jin's gauntlet interfaced with the projection. Data cascaded, non-Euclidean angles, fractal logic. They visualized the strip as a spiral, time as a helix, but the conclave's feedback was immediate, a neural lash that dropped Jin to their elbows. Pain, hot and precise, etched itself into their cortex. Failure. A younger Starforged, Naira, whimpered. Her gauntlet sparked as she misaligned the strip's vertices. The conclave's punishment was swift, her left eye liquefied, replaced by a biolens that displayed error codes. She did not scream. Screaming was illogical. Again, the conclave buzzed. Jin's vision glitched. For a heartbeat, the chamber walls melted, replaced by a corridor of screaming light. A voice, human, echoed, "Find us." Jin, Rook's grip on their shoulder was a static shock. The vision dissolved. "Focus," the conclave warned. Post-lesson, the Starforged retreated to the atrium of spliced memory. The room was a womb of fleshy tendrils, each capable of neural linkage. Here, they shared traumas like currency. Jin avoided the tendrils. Their own memories were fraying at the edges, infected by visions they dared not share. Instead, they found Rook crouched behind a pulsating growth, cradling a relic. "What is that?" Jin pulsed. Rook's gauntlet dimmed, secrecy, but relented. The object was a small, rusted thing, a human figurine, its plastic face eroded by time. "I found it in Sector 9, Rook pulsed. "The Shardspire grows around old things sometimes." Jin recoiled. The figurine's smile was wrong, its proportions archaic, pre-Vaelthari. "Destroy it," Jin ordered. Rook's pulse spiked defiance. "It's a toy. They gave these to children to pretend with." "Pretending is weakness," the Conclave taught us. What if they lied? The growth behind them shuddered. Jin's gauntlet ignited, ready to sever the tendril eavesdropping. But the Shardspire's walls rippled, a precursor to reconfiguration. "We are the grand thesis," Jin said, parroting the Conclave. "We don't pretend, we survive." Rook pocketed the figurine. Maybe survival isn't enough. That night, the Shardspire screamed. Jin awoke to the floor undulating, tendrils retracting into the walls. The air tasted metallic. Starforged scrambled, their gauntlets casting panic in strobes of red and violet. To the core, the Conclave commanded, "Now." Rook lagged, drawn to a fissure in the wall. Beyond it, a corridor that shouldn't exist, its walls slick with black fluid. "Rook," Jin pulsed. He reached for the fissure. "Do you hear that?" A sound like glass breaking, a smell like burnt hair. The Conclave's punishment was instant. Rook's gauntlet overheated, searing his palm. "Obey." In the core, the Vaelthari swarm churned violently. The hologram displayed the Shardspire's outer layer, a fractal shell now pocked with holes, as if something had gnawed at reality itself. "An anomaly," the Conclave said. "Insignificant." But Jin's glitches returned, visions of a planet unraveling into tentacles, a human voice pleading, "They're coming." Rook returned to the fissure at twilight cycle, his burned hand wrapped in biofilm. The figurine weighed in his pocket, a secret talisman. The fissure had widened. Inside, the corridor curved into impossible angles, light bending like wet paint. At its end, a flicker of something, a silhouette with too many joints. Rook's gauntlet activated on its own. The thing turned. It had no face, only a vortex of screaming light where its head should be. The walls peeled back, revealing a labyrinth of teeth and mirrors. Rook's gauntlet screamed in unison with the light. "Jin!" But the fissure sealed, trapping him with the echo. Chapter 2. The air in the Shardspire tasted of copper and ozone, a metallic tang that clung to the back of Jin's throat. They stood in the atrium of spliced memory, tendrils of bioluminescent fungus writhing overhead like nerves exposed to open air. Rook knelt nearby, his bio-gauntlet fused to a synaptic terminal, downloading the Conclave's latest directives. His fingers twitched, a human reflex the Vaelthari had never fully erased. "Another drill," Rook said, flexing his gauntlet. The cartilage ridges along its spine glowed faintly, casting his face in jagged shadows. "They're escalating simulations. Last cycle, Naira's heart stopped for 6 minutes after a feedback surge." Jin didn't answer. They were too busy watching the wall. The Shardspire's inner membrane had begun to blister, bulging inward as if pressed by an invisible hand. Tiny fissures spiderwebbed across its surface, leaking a viscous black fluid that evaporated before hitting the floor. Jin's gauntlet hummed, its organic sensors prickling. "You're ignoring me again," Rook said. "The walls are breathing wrong," Jin muttered. Rook followed their gaze. "It's reconfiguring," the Conclave said Sector 12 would. A sound cut him off, a low-frequency shudder, like a starship engine grinding through glass. The tendrils overhead recoiled, snapping back into the ceiling. Jin's gauntlet flared crimson, its biolenses auto-targeting the blister. That's not a drill. The membrane ruptured. Reality peeled open in a helix of screaming light, and the nullworm echo poured through. It had no true shape, only a seething mass of fractal angles and prismatic glare. The air around it warped, floor tiles inverting into ceilings, gravity dissolving into a kaleidoscope of directions. Jin's vision glitched. Suddenly they were staring at their own back, limbs twisted into a Möbius strip. Focus. They bit down until their gums bled, the pain a grounding anchor. The conclave's teachings roared to the surface. Nullworms are pattern devourers. Break their symmetry and they break. Rook, spiral formation now. Rook was already moving, his gauntlet firing shards of crystallized dark matter. The projectiles struck the Echo's core, detonating into recursive geometries that briefly stalled its advance. Naira and the others surged forward, gauntlets interlacing to form a neural net. Jin felt their consciousnesses brush against theirs, sharp, clinical, devoid of fear. The Starforged didn't fear. Fear was a chaos vector. The Echo retaliated. A tendril of distorted spacetime lashed out, shearing through Kale's left arm. His bio-gauntlet short-circuited, spraying acidic ichor as it attempted to regenerate. He didn't scream. Screaming was inefficient. Instead, he pulsed a damage report to the net. Limb loss, non-critical, redirecting pain receptors. Jin's glitches worsened. The chamber melted into overlapping realities, a derelict starship here, a frozen tundra there, all superimposed over the Shardspire's biomechanical guts. A voice whispered through the static, human and raw, "Find us, please." Focus. They launched themselves at the Echo, gauntlet primed to inject a logic virus. The Conclave's weapon was a living algorithm designed to unravel parasitic intelligences. It hit the Echo's core. And the world split. Jin plummeted through layers of dissolving reality. A cityscape folded inside out, skyscrapers birthing fleshy tumors. A colony ship's crew mutated into glass statues, their final screams echoing in crystalline lungs. And beneath it all, the voice again. Earth coordinates, repeating. Earth. The word was a relic, forbidden. The Conclave had purged it from their lexicon, along with mother and father and home. Jin's gauntlets sparked, overloading as the Echo's paradoxes flooded their neural net. They tasted blood, their own, and then Rook was dragging them back, gauntlets screeching as it severed corrupted data streams. "Stay with me," Rook growled. For a heartbeat, his voice wasn't a pulse but sound, vibrating through air molecules. Human. The Echo recoiled, its light dimming. Naira seized the opening, her gauntlet firing a black hole shard, a Vaelthari relic so volatile even the Conclave feared it. The shard struck true, imploding the Echo into a singularity the size of a fist. For 3 seconds, gravity inverted. Jin clung to the floor as the Shardspire's tendons groaned, blood vessels bursting in their eyes. Then silence. The chamber was a ruin. Bioluminescent fluid dripped from gashes in the walls. Kale knelt beside his severed arm, calmly reattaching it via exposed nerve cables. Naira's gauntlet had fused to her ribs, its organic circuitry grafting to her sternum. She showed no discomfort. Pain was data. Rook gripped Jin's shoulder. "You glitched again." "It spoke to me." "Nullworms don't speak, they corrupt." "Not the Echo, a voice, human." Rook's pupils dilated, a tell. He reached into his thigh compartment, withdrawing the plastic figurine he'd scavenged weeks prior. Its smile was chipped, one arm missing. Maybe it's connected to this. Jin recoiled. "You kept it. The Conclave will purge you." "They haven't noticed yet." He rotated the figurine, revealing glyphs etched into its base. "I've been decoding these. They're coordinates, old Earth script." The chamber lights flickered. The Conclave's swarm descended, 1,000 insectoid bodies clicking in dissonant harmony. "You delayed reporting the breach," they accused, telepathy laced with neural static. Jin knelt, gauntlet pressed to the floor in submission. The echo is neutralized. Irrelevant, the anomaly breached Sector 7 Alpha. You compromised the net. Naira stepped forward, her new biolens whirring. We contain the threat. Efficiency rating, 89%. The swarm rippled. Efficiency is secondary. Obedience is paramount. A punishment pulse tore through the neural net. Jin's gauntlet overheated, searing their forearm. Rook collapsed, blood trickling from his nose. Naira's lens cracked, error codes blooming across its surface. The human relic, the conclave pulsed. Surrender it. Rook froze. Jin felt his panic through the net, a hot, jagged thing. They never felt anything so human. I destroyed it, Rook lied. The swarm converged on him. Deception is a cancer. A tendril lashed out, piercing Rook's thigh compartment. The figurine clattered to the floor. The conclave's telepathy sharpened into a scalpel. You cling to entropy. Why? Rook stared at the figurine. It's a piece of us, of what we were. What you were was weakness. We forged you stronger. The swarm engulfed the figurine, dissolving it into molecular dust. Rook's pulse spiked, anger, grief, but he smothered it, his gauntlet dimming to neutral blue. Return to your duties, the conclave ordered. The Shardspire self-repairs. As the swarm dispersed, Jin lingered. The voice from the glitch lingered too, echoing in their skull. Find us. They found Rook in the aftershock. He stood at a viewport, staring into the fractal void beyond the Shardspire. His reflection warped in the glass, gauntlet fused to his arm like a parasitic second skeleton. You heard it too, Jin said. The voice. Rook didn't turn. The conclave will purge us if we pursue this. Then why do you want to? He tapped the viewport. Out there in the abyss, a star flickered, an anomaly since the Shardspire lurked in dead space. Because we weren't meant to live in a cage, even one that breathes. Jin's gauntlet prickled. They opened a private neural channel, shielded from the conclave's sensors. A data packet materialized, garbled audio, repeating on loop. Any survivors, this is Captain Elias Marlowe of the EFS Horizon. We're trapped in the Kuiper Belt. Something, S here, it's eating the fleet. Coordinates attached. For God's sake, if you're human, help us. The transmission, dated to 3 Earth cycles prior. Rook's breath hitched. You intercepted it during the breach. The echo wasn't attacking us, Jin said. It was hunting the signal. The conclave knew. They tried to erase it. The star in the viewport pulsed, except it wasn't a star, it was a ship. Tiny, primitive, leaking radiation. Human. Rook smiled, all teeth. Let's see what else they're hiding. Chapter 3. The Shardspire's corridors hummed with a feverish energy, its bioluminescent veins pulsing arrhythmically. Jin traced a hand along the wall, their gauntlet sensors prickling at the sticky residue coating the surface, a byproduct of the megastructure's frantic self-repairs. It smelled like burnt sugar and decay. Rook waited at the edge of Sector 9, his silhouette distorted by the warped air. The breach had left scars here. The floor undulated like muscle tissue, and the ceiling dripped a viscous fluid that dissolved on contact. He held up a shard of black crystal, its edges flickering with trapped starlight. Found it near the aft ganglia, he said. The conclave, been harvesting dark matter again. This much refinement, they're preparing for war. Jin's gauntlet throbbed. The crystal was Vaelthari made, but its resonance matched the nullworm echo they'd fought. They lied about the echo being an anomaly. This is a weapon. Or a failed one. Rook pocketed the shard. The human ship's closer. I can feel it. They'd monitored the flicker in the void for days, a primitive fusion drive sputtering in the dark. The coordinates from the figurine and the Horizon's distress call aligned. Captain Marlowe's crew was adrift in a derelict sector, unaware the Shardspire loomed just beyond their sensors. We need to reach them first, Rook said, before the conclave does. Jin's vision glitched. For a heartbeat, Rook's face melted into a lattice of biomechanical wiring, his gauntlet fused to his spine. They blinked, and he was human again. Mostly. "The Conclave will purge us if we deviate," Jin said. "They'll purge us either way." Rook tapped his gauntlet, and a hologram sputtered to life, a star map riddled with crimson markers. Nullworm infestations. They're spreading faster. The Conclave's hiding it, but the Shardspire's systems are infected. The markers clustered near Earth's colonies. Jin's glitches worsened, flashes of cities dissolving into hive flesh, humans with too many eyes chanting in unison. "Find us," the voice pleaded louder now. "The human ship," Jin said. "If they've survived this long, they've seen the nullworms. Their data could help us." "Or they're already corpses." Rook's grin was sharp. "Either way, better us than the Conclave." They waited until Twilight Cycle, when the Shardspire's neural networks rerouted power to its healing organs. The path to the docking spire was a labyrinth of half-formed corridors and exposed tendons, the air thick with spores that clung to Jin's lungs. Rook navigated by instinct, his gauntlet interfacing with dormant terminals to bypass security protocols. "Here," he whispered. The airlock door was sealed beneath a membrane of living resin. Rook pressed his gauntlet to it, and the resin retracted with a wet gasp. Beyond lay a derelict hangar, its vaulted ceiling strung with cobwebs of alien silk. In the center sat a Vaelthari scout pod, a bulbous, organic vessel with a translucent hull. Jin hesitated. This pod's keyed to Conclave DNA. "Not anymore." Rook pried open the pod's flesh-like hatch. The interior reeked of fermented enzymes. "I spliced our biometrics into the system. The Conclave won't notice unless they deep scan. And if they do, then we're already dead." The pod shuddered as it detached, sliding into the void. Jin watched the Shardspire recede, a jagged monument of bone and biotech, its surface scarred by the Conclave's endless calculations. For the first time, it looked fragile. Rook guided the pod through a debris field of dead drones, their carapaces etched with nullworm glyphs. "The human ship's just beyond that nebula," he said. "They're running silent. No weapons, minimal life support." The pod's sensors pinged. A vessel materialized on the view screen, a boxy, angular thing labeled EFS Horizon. Its hull was pocked with burns, and a massive tear split its midsection, sealed haphazardly with polymer foam. Human ingenuity, human desperation. "They're alive," Rook said. Heat signatures flickered on the scan, 12 bodies clustered in the engineering bay. "Barely." Jin's gauntlet buzzed, a proximity alert. Something S out there. The nebula's gas clouds parted, revealing a Dominion warship. It was a blade of black steel, its hull studded with railgun batteries and purity seals, crossed swords over a DNA helix. The Dominion of Sol's insignia glowed crimson on its flank. A broadcast blared through the comms. "Attention, unidentified vessel. This is the DNS Purifier. Surrender for inspection or be cleansed." Rook cursed. "They've been tracking the horizon, probably think it's infected." "Are they wrong?" Jin nodded to the warship's scan data. The Horizon's crew biosigns were erratic, spiking with adrenaline and something else, a fungal pattern in their bloodstreams. "Nullworm spores," Rook muttered. "The crew's infected. The Dominion will vaporize the ship." "Then we retrieve the data first." Jin activated the pod's thrusters. "Get me aboard." The pod docked with the Horizon's airlock, its organic seals adhering to the human metal with a sickening squelch. The interior was a graveyard of dead lights and frozen blood. Jin stepped over a corpse fused to the wall, its flesh crystallized into jagged quartz. "This wasn't the nullworms," Rook said, inspecting the crystal. "The Dominion did this. Gamma weaponry purges mutations at the atomic level." A moan echoed from the engineering bay. They found the survivors huddled around a dying reactor, their skin mottled with bioluminescent veins. Captain Marlowe clutched a sidearm, his left eye replaced by a mechanical sensor. "Stay back," he rasped. "We're clean, I swear." Jin raised their gauntlet, its neutral glow illuminating the room. "We're not Dominion." Marlowe blinked. "What the hell are you?" Answers later. Rook knelt beside a terminal, his gauntlet jacking into the ship's database. "Your distress signal mentioned the nullworms. What did you see?" Marlowe's crew exchanged glances. A young engineer spoke up, her voice trembling. "They turned the Jovian dawn into a thing. The hull grew teeth. The crew, they melted together, started chanting. We barely escaped." "Chanting what?" Jin asked. The engineer hesitated. "From the void we devour. From the devoured we rise." Rook froze. "That's Vaelthari." "What?" "The language. It's a dialect the Conclave uses for archival rites." The reactor shuddered. Alerts blared. The purifier had locked targeting scanners. "We need to leave," Jin said. "No," Marlowe grabbed their arm. His touch burned with fever. "Take us with you. The Dominion's killing everyone who's been near those things, infected or not." Jin's glitches surged, visions of Marlowe's skull cracking open, tendrils of light spewing from his mouth. The spore infection was spreading, adapting. "You're dying," Jin said. "Then let us die free." Rook yanked his gauntlet free, clutching a data chip. "Got the logs, now move." They fled as the purifier's railguns charged. The pod launched just as the horizon erupted into a fireball, gamma rays shearing through its remains. Jin watched the light fade, Marlowe's final scream echoing through the comms static. "The Conclave knew," Rook whispered. "The nullworms, they're Vaelthari." The Shardspire's docking spire recoiled as they returned, its membranes sealing behind them. The Conclave awaited, their swarm vibrating with rage. "You transgressed," they thundered. "You risked exposure." Jin stepped forward. "The nullworms speak your language. You created them." Silence. Then the swarm parted, revealing a hologram, a star system consumed by a fractal bloom, planets reduced to hive nodes. "An experiment," the Conclave admitted. "We sought to harness astral dark matter. The nullworms were an unintended mutation." Rook laughed, raw and human. "You bred monsters, and now you're hiding from them." "We adapt, we endure." "By torturing us," Jin's gauntlet flared. "You infected us with their DNA, made us see the world through their eyes. We're not your grand thesis, we're your antibodies." The swarm surged. "You are necessary." "Liar!" Rook hurled the dark matter shard. It pierced the swarm, dissolving a dozen Vaelthari into ash. "You're cowards, and we're done." Alarms wailed. The Shardspire convulsed, its organs contracting in protest. Naira and the others appeared, gauntlets raised, not in defense of the Conclave, but in solidarity. "You will obey," the Conclave commanded. Jin's vision shattered. They saw the Shardspire's core, a pulsating heart of dark matter, its rhythms synced to the nullworm hive mind.
This story continues. Subscribe to our channel, like the video, and listen to the rest.